The webinar, we hope, will allow you to get an insight into the issues impacting on addressing these issues, IUU fishing and fisheries crime in our states over the past 20 years. Thinking, of course, of the recent initiatives as member states signing on to the International Declaration on Transnational Organized Crime in the fishing industry, what we love to call the Copenhagen Declaration, and the launching of the Blue Justice Web, a Caribbean Blue Justice Web, to be launched in Jamaica shortly. We have a very distinguished panel here, Mr. Milton Haughton, the Executive Director of the CRFM Secretariat. He will give some opening remarks, and he will speak to the development of the regional framework to combat fisheries crime in our states. Dr. Ralby, all the way from Jakarta in Indonesia, is a maritime crime expert and president of Consilium worldwide. He'll be talking on the extent of IUU fishing in the Caribbean. Mr. Adrian Loroda, who's the chair of the Caribbean Network of Fisherfolk Organization, will be given the fisher's perspective on IUU fishing and fisheries crime. Mr. Gunnar Stølsvik from the Fisheries section for Fisheries Crime and Compliance, Fisheries Department of Norway, will look at the challenges to unavailable tools for addressing the issues of which we speak. The outside view, bringing on the experience from Norway, and hopefully he will also be talking about the Blue Justice Initiative. Mr. Virun Lutchman is a maritime analyst at the CARICOM implementation agency for crime and security, IMPACS, and he'll be giving us an idea of the regional efforts to support our member states in dealing with these two issues. And Lieutenant Commander Rolerick is the regional maritime officer at the Regional Security System headquarters in Barbados, and he'll be talking about capacity building for addressing IUU fishing and fisheries crime. I am your host, Peter A. Murray, Advisor Fisheries Management and Development at the CRFM Secretariat. Just to point to the fact that there are some resources available. If you went into the video and looked at the video, they would have pointed to them, and we'll be sharing some of these resources with you. And I will now like to call on Mr. Milton Haughton, the Executive Director of the CRFM Secretariat, who will give some brief opening remarks and then take us into a look at the development of the regional framework to combat fisheries crime in CARICOM.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. And a very, very warm welcome to all of you on behalf of the CRFM. I am indeed very honored to be here today as we continue the celebration of the 20th anniversary of the CRFM. Our webinar today is focused on the subject of addressing IUU fishing and other fisheries crime in the CRFM member states. It is truly remarkable when we pause to reflect on the progress we have made in the fisheries sector, working together as a region over the past 20 years. The CRFM was officially launched in March of 2003. We were launched as an indigenous, specialized regional fisheries organization to provide a mechanism for cooperation among our countries to improve sustainable development, conservation, management, and protection of the living marine resources in the waters under the sovereignty and jurisdiction of our member states, as well as to support sustainable livelihoods of fishing communities and contribute to food and nutrition security in our countries. We have collaboratively developed and implemented numerous projects, regional policies, and measures to address these broad strategic objectives. For example, we have improved basic knowledge and understanding of our fisheries. We have prepared fisheries management plans, promoted responsible fisheries practices, including addressing IUU fishing and fisheries crime. We have taken actions to protect vulnerable species and marine ecosystems and mitigate the negative impacts of climate change and sargassum blooms, etc., in our waters. We have strengthened regional and national governance frameworks and legal and regulatory systems. We have invested in the provision of long and short-term training of fisheries personnel, including fisherfolk and private sector operators in the region. We have built capacity of fisheries organizations across the region, including the private sector. We have represented and coordinated the involvement of our countries at regional and international meetings to ensure that our voices are heard and our needs and interests are taken into consideration and addressed. We have developed key strategic partnerships and collaborated with international and regional development partners and stakeholders across the region and internationally to mobilize resources and implement projects to enhance the resilience of the fisheries sector in the face of climate change, ocean acidification, and other challenges arising from pollution and other anthropogenic sources. Today's webinar is indeed a reaffirmation of the ongoing commitment and dedication of the CRFM, its member states and development partners in advancing the principles and practice of responsible and sustainable fisheries and protection of our valuable marine living resources and marine environment. IUU and other fisheries crime are indeed very serious issues that we must eradicate and prevent in order to effectively protect our fishery resources, our fisheries communities, and the livelihoods of coastal communities, and food and nutrition security of our people across the region. As we move forward, we must further raise awareness of the important role that fisheries and aquaculture play in food and nutrition security, in livelihoods, poverty eradication, trade, and social and economic development of our countries. And we must also raise public awareness of the extent and the detrimental and destructive impacts of IUU fishing and other fisheries crime on our fish stocks, our marine ecosystems, our marine environment, and our economies and communities. Over the past 20 years, we have indeed made significant strides in advancing and protecting our fisheries. However, there is still much work to be done. We must continue to address the growing challenges and threats posed by climate change, ocean acidification, pollution, and habitat destruction, as well as irresponsible fishing practices, including the scourge of IUU and fisheries crime. So as we celebrate our 20th anniversary, let us renew our commitment to 1, the sustainable use and effective management and protection of our marine living resources and ecosystems. 2, the continued growth and success of the CRFM. 3, the prosperity and success of our hard-working and brave fisherfolk and their families. And 4, the sustainable growth and development of each of our member states. I am confident that with our collective efforts, we can achieve a more sustainable and prosperous future for our people and our countries based on the resources in our marine environment. In other words, promoting and expanding our blue growth potential. Thank you very much, and God bless you. So I will now transition to the short presentation that I will give on the regional framework to combat IUU fishing. Yeah. So let me just say a few words about the importance of fisheries globally and in the region. Fisheries are extremely important. They are strategically important for a number of reasons. Production globally is about 214 million metric tons. In the region is between 130 to 160,000 metric tons. And this is from the domestic fisheries. Now, it's a vital source of food and nutrition. including protein and essential nutrients and micronutrients. It's very important for livelihoods. A lot of people in the region and globally are employed in the fisheries sector. Demand for fish and seafood is growing. Per capita consumption is very high globally as well as in the region. In the region, it's even higher than the global average. Many fisheries at the same time are overexploited, 30% approximately. And fish and seafood, they are the most highly traded food commodity globally. In the region, we earn anywhere from $230 to $300 million each year from fisheries. Effective management, conservation, and protection of the fish stocks are extremely, extremely important. We also have some fish stocks that are underutilized or unutilized, and we need to bring all these into production. However, the big problem we face, major problem, very serious, is IUU fishing and fisheries crime. So, and this covered a wide range of offenses along the entire fisheries supply chain, both on land and at sea, including illegal fishing, seafood fraud, document fraud, tax evasion, corruption, money laundering, and trafficking in various forms, human trafficking, arms trafficking, drugs trafficking. So these criminal networks tend to use fishing as a cover for their nefarious and wrongful activities. Fisheries crime is really economic crime, and we really need to see it as such. And it's very, very detrimental to our interests in the region. It's damaging to our ecosystems. It's damaging to the legitimate interest of fisher folk, and it contributes to overfishing and loss of opportunities. Seafood fraud is a major problem throughout our region, and so these are things that we must pay attention to. And the drivers of IUU are many, but the economic incentive, the fact is, it is lucrative business. Those who engage in it can make a lot of money, and that is one of the key things that drives IUU and fisheries crime. But there are some other factors, such as subsidies that's provided by government, weak governance and regulations in our countries and in other countries that suffer from IUU and fisheries crime, low risk of being arrested because of our limited monitoring, control, and surveillance capacity. And if they are arrested, the sanctions that are imposed tend to be on the low side. And really, very often, the sanctions do not function as a deterrent to stop illegal operators from entering our system. Now, okay, before I go to the core of my presentation, let me just briefly mention the international framework to fight IUU and fisheries crime. And these are some of the key fisheries-related instruments that we have, from the Law of the Sea Convention, the FAO Compliance Agreement, the Code of Conduct and Responsible Fisheries, the Fish Stocks Agreement, International Plan of Action on IUU fishing, the Port States Agreement from 2009, and last year, through the WTO, countries agreed to the Fisheries Subsidies Agreement. So these are all very, very key part of the international architecture for dealing with IUU and fisheries crime. Now, to focus on the regional policy framework, ever since the launch of the CRFM, we have been working on addressing IUU fishing. IUU has been identified as a priority action by our policymakers. And one of the first key instruments that we developed is the Castries Declaration on IUU fishing. And it presents a roadmap for cooperation and collaboration among our countries and international development partners and regional partners in dealing with the subject of IUU and fisheries crime. So, you know, it's a fairly comprehensive document. We also have the Caribbean Community Common Fisheries Policy that was adopted in by the quoted in 2014. Again, this is a broader instrument establishing a framework and a roadmap for our broader fisheries development, conservation, protection, and management objectives, including, of course, dealing with IUU fishing and protecting our fisheries resources. In addition, we have a number of regional strategies and manuals and ministerial declarations that we have adopted over the years. We are also part of a regional working group within the framework of the FAO, Western Central Atlantic Fisheries Commission. And this working group was developed at our recommendation. Our countries were the main proponents of this working group to ensure that at the wider regional level, we're able to work together more effectively to address this scourge of IUU and fisheries crime. And this has led to the development and adoption of a wider Caribbean regional plan of action on IUU fishing. And this also is a very, very important policy document applying to not just the CRFM and CARICOM countries, but the countries in the wider Caribbean region. So I mentioned already the various other policy documents, the MCS strategy and action plan, and policy documents dealing with enforcement and monitoring and training, capacity development of our MCS agencies. And more recently, as Peter mentioned in his introduction, our countries have signed on to the Copenhagen Declaration on Transnational Organized Crime in the global fishing industry. And this is a very, very important instrument that creates a framework for strengthened regional and international cooperation in combating fisheries crime in particular. So this is some text from the Copenhagen, from the ministerial declaration addressing the Copenhagen Declaration and the Blue Justice Initiative that is sponsored by the government of Norway, and that 14 of our countries have signed up to and are working together with the international community in strengthening our capacity and strengthening the information base to address fisheries crime. So in conclusion, we have made significant strides over the years in combating fisheries crime and IUU fisheries. But developing our ocean economy means that we are going to have to do much more than we have done in the past. So we do need stronger action to combat fisheries crime, including IUU fishing in the region. So while we have made progress, there's still a lot more to be done to prevent and to deter and eventually eliminate IUU and fisheries crime in the region. So the security of our maritime domains, they're key to long-term strategies to ensure continued sustainable production of our fish stock, that our marine resources remain abundant and our ecosystems and marine environment remain healthy. Enhanced governance and regulatory frameworks are required. So we need to focus on continued enhanced interagency cooperation at national, regional, as well as international level. We need to work together to enforce our laws and regulations. And of course, we need to strengthen our MCS capacities, including using available technologies and improve evidence and and evidence-based decision making to be more effective in dealing with the scourge of IUU fishing and fisheries crime. So, Chairman, in summary, that's my brief presentation on the overview of the development of the regional framework for dealing with IUU and fisheries crime. Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Ian, mindful of the fact that you are very late at night. Carry on smartly.
Thank you so much, distinguished panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends. It's great to see so many familiar names on the list of participants, and I wish that we could all be together in person. I'm delighted to be able to call in from Jakarta, though, so it is wonderful what technology allows us to do, and I am very happy to share a few thoughts on fisheries crime in the Caribbean, and share a little bit about how it has manifested over the years and how it's continuing to evolve. So I think one of the challenges is that we have become somewhat, I would say, lazy in our use of the term IUU fishing. We tend to use it as a catch-all term to encompass almost everything that we find undesirable in the fishery space. And the problem with that is that it blurs a lot of lines and a lot of distinctions between important different activities that need to be countered in different ways. And so I think we need to, first of all, keep the I, the U, and the U separate and make sure that we are recognizing the difference between illegal fishing, unreported fishing, and unregulated fishing. And I'll come back to that in a moment. But we also need to remember that IUU fishing is not the same thing as fisheries crime. Fisheries crime is about using the fishing sector in all its forms, in all its supply chain, for other illicit purposes. So the problem is that IUU fishing is fundamentally about the sustainability of the fishery. We are using laws, we are using reporting requirements, and we are using regulations in order to safeguard the sustainability of the marine environment. And so when any of those triggering mechanisms are violated in some ways, it damages the marine sustainability. Fisheries crime, on the other hand, is about using the infrastructure of fishing, be it the vessels, the fishers, the docks, the supply chain, the financial infrastructure, in order to commit other crimes. And this is where we see the use of fishing vessels to traffic drugs or weapons, or human beings. We see forced labor and even human slavery on board vessels. We see all kinds of things moving through the supply chain that is intended to move fish, but could be used to move either illicit goods or even terrorists themselves. And we see all kinds of, as was pointed out previously, economic related crimes that can be incredibly damaging, both to the sector itself and to national economies and the national security picture of the states most affected. And so I think it is at the outset really important to distinguish those two. Sustainability of the fisheries is the focus of IUU fishing, and law enforcement and the maintenance of the rules-based order being the main focus of fisheries crime. I think one of the ways of really making sure we grasp quickly why it is so important to distinguish between illegal fishing, unreported fishing, and unregulated fishing is that when you ask the question, who can solve each, you end up with different answers. Fundamentally, who can deal with illegal fishing is the law enforcement community. It is a law enforcement issue, and that applies either the law enforcement side of fisheries or Coast Guard, Marine Police Force, or even in some cases a Navy. In the unregulated fishing space, that is not the purview of those same agencies. That requires a different response. And so we need to always be mindful of what problem it is that we have so we can be mindful of how we can solve it. And keeping those things separate is really important. And I apologize for the extra U in unreported, but IUU seems to really be creeping in everywhere. And the refrigerated vessels, the reefers that are entering the region and carrying fish away without ever landing it in the region are a growing problem. Fisheries crime is, as we said, distinctive in that it is not about the fish, it is about what the fishing sector is being used to do. And so we see in, unfortunately, the Caribbean, a huge amount of activity relating to other crimes. And no crime is more visible and well known in the region, in the maritime domain, than the trafficking of drugs. And the drug space has evolved immensely. But one of the things that I think is really important to point out in terms of fisheries crime is that it used to be that in order to make a profit on drugs, you needed large quantities. And so you were looking at usually either cocaine or marijuana shipping in larger and larger quantities. And to some extent, we still see that today. A lot of the containerized drug trafficking is now bringing in tons, not just kilos, of cocaine into different ports around the world. But that is happening on large commercial vessels. In the fisheries space, though, we see new types of drugs that are entering the market and dominating the market in many regards, like fentanyl, other opioids, other synthetics, and new drugs that have become popular, like xylazine or trank dope, that is a not traditionally human-consumed drug. It is actually an animal tranquilizer that is being used to gain a high and at the same time causes skin and other flesh to go necrotic. It's a very disturbing trend. But the point is that it does not take large volume in order to make a profit on some of these. And so we are seeing new drugs being able to move in small quantities and thus on small vessels. Equally, we are seeing a real problem with weapons in the region. I remember when I started working in the region more than 10 years ago, drug trafficking was almost the unitary focus. Arms were kind of secondary. And in one interview I had with a government official at one point, not from the region, but from outside the region, she literally said, yeah, drugs are really the problem. Guns aren't so much an issue because we don't know if they'll even use them. And of course, having grown up in Baltimore, I can tell you that if you have a gun, it is a form of using it. And so there are all kinds of problems now with shootings, with violence, and with gangs related to weapons. And unfortunately, they move in multiple directions, from the south and from the north. And unfortunately, it is rather easy to move them in some cases just via fishing vessels. And that has become, given the general hiding in plain sight opportunity that the fishing sector provides, a major means of moving small arms and light weapons. And I think that it is telling that we have seen such a rise in weapons across the entirety of the region, and whether it is through DHL and FedEx by air or through fishing vessels by sea, it's now the case that if you wiped out all the weapons moving from either south to north or north to south, by the time you finished sort of cleaning out, going in that direction, the weapons would likely have backfilled. So we are seeing a huge amount of weapon movement in the region. Fuel smuggling and fuel-related arbitrage is a major issue, and we have seen that ebb and flow with changes in fuel price. At one point, Venezuela's fuel was the lowest priced fuel in the world, and as a result, we saw a huge amount of both flows out of Venezuela as well as multi-directional flows where it would be double and triple arbitrage, jumping up the island chain and taking advantage of different prices in the jurisdictions. Additionally, subsidies tend to promote this kind of activity as well. Perhaps more obscure, but no less important, is the smuggling of meat. And I have spared you the photos of what most of that looks like on arrival, but fishing vessels tend to move in higher volume during the holiday seasons, carrying meats from different parts of usually South America into the region in order to be able to supply the high demand for meats around the holidays. This is both illegal and it causes all kinds of concern relating to public health. This is perhaps the least known, but certainly increasingly felt issue, which is the role of fishing vessels in the mining sector. Now, there are two different aspects to this. On the one hand, there are supplies for the illegal mining sector, traditionally now the mining of gold, in South America that the fishing vessels have been used to supply. Some of that is mercury, some of it is cyanide, and some of it is actually the very engines of the ships themselves. In order to create gold out of the ore, it is required to somehow strip it. And there are two main ways of doing that. One is using mercury, and the other is using a cyanidation plant. And you can create a makeshift cyanidation plant with two ingredients, cyanide and a motor. And so the motors from vessels are being stolen in large numbers, largely to supply the growing demand for mining in South America. Next slide, please. Migrant vessels, migrant smuggling on fishing vessels is a problem with which we are all familiar, but I want to highlight that it often has led to a co-location of crime. So in other words, if we are seeing migrants being smuggled up the island chain or across the region, we are sometimes seeing that happening in concert with drug trafficking and arms trafficking. And so we need to recognize the interrelated nature of this crime. In fact, some who were previously drug traffickers turned to migrant smuggling in order to make a higher profit, because for a while, smuggling migrants in the Caribbean was actually the highest priced activity, criminal activity, and fishing vessels were used in many cases. Finally, I want to focus on money, and this is my last real point, which is that the Caribbean has a unique dynamic in that for years, the focus of fisheries ministries, agencies, and departments has been on the sustainability of the fishery. And at the same time, a lot of law enforcement agencies have been almost uniformly focused on drug trafficking. But the two overlap in reality, but often do not when it comes to the mentality of those working to enforce their respected objectives. In other words, a lot of law enforcement agencies have been hesitant to search fishing vessels for drugs or weapons or any other contraband, because that is really the purview of the fisheries agencies. And so this gap between fisheries and law enforcement has opened up a blind spot in the region that drug cartels in particular have exploited. And what they have found is that they can purchase fishing vessels, have them registered in the name of a lawyer, and they can get a double benefit. On the one hand, they are basically shielded from liability and actually obscured from being involved. They are the beneficial owners, but they're not the registered owners. And so when their vessels are arrested with drugs and a crew on Monday, the vessel gets returned to that lawyer on Tuesday, and they can start trafficking again on Wednesday. And so this sort of cycle of using a vessel that is owned through essentially a shield protects them from liability for the drug trafficking. And at the same time, they get an economic benefit in the sense that they can be asked for an unexplained wealth declaration. In other words, how did you make $10 million this last year, Mr. Drug Lord? And the response is, talk to my lawyer. I own a fleet of fishing vessels. I made it through fishing. And in many cases, it is hard to prove or disprove that. So the money laundering through the fishing sector is a real problem that has emboldened and in some ways strengthened the ability of the criminal cartels to control the sector. In conclusion, I think that we really need to work to close the blind spot. The first blind spot is that when we look at fisheries, we are focused on sustainability. It's not security or law enforcement. Navies and Coast Guards, on the other hand, are focused on security and law enforcement and not so much on sustainability. Last 2 points. How can we protect fisheries if law enforcement is not involved? And how can we secure the rule of law if fisheries are not involved? They both have to be. And on a very personal note, I just want to thank Peter Murray. He and I met in 2017 in person for the first time, and we've been in touch before that. And I want to say that of all the regional fisheries mechanisms and regional fisheries management organizations I've worked with around the world, the CRFM has been the most committed to including fisheries crime as well as IUU fishing in its focus. And as it celebrates the 20th anniversary, I think the CRFM is adding tremendous value and benefit to the full spectrum of the marine environment in the Caribbean. And I just want to say a heartfelt congratulations both to Peter and to the whole CRFM. Here's to the next 20 years, and thank you very much.
I want to thank you again, Mr. Peter, for allowing the CNFO to participate in this webinar. I have to say, though, that it's interesting that Mr. Haughton and just now Ian tagged on a lot of the things that I included in my presentation. So I'm just going to, not to repeat them, I'm just going to do the synopsis of my presentation and then wait for questions. I wish to present the CNFO's views on the topic of illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing. The Caribbean Network of Fisherfolk Organizations is a non-government organization comprising the national fisherfolk organizations of 18 CARICOM countries and territories. IUU fishing accounts for an approximate loss to Caribbean states of about $800 million per year. Our member states are capture fisheries primarily, and the loss of these significant sums impacts our export earnings, which in turn impact the livelihoods of our people and fisher people in particular. As was mentioned by Mr. Haughton, there are millions of people within the CARICOM constituency that rely on capture fisheries for their livelihoods. The impact of these losses cannot only be stated in monetary terms, but it also impacts food security and somehow aids in terrorist financing. It is important to note that the global demand for legally harvested fish products is trending downwards, which is reflected in the price of fish products in our member states. And the question is, why are these prices trending downwards? We surmise it's because of the impact of illegal fishing done by many, many industrial fleets that are allowed to ply the waters of the Caribbean. And even though there is an effort upfront to basically combat this threat, our agencies are somehow sufficiently ill-equipped to deal with such operations. Or in a few cases, our governments are complicit too by agreeing to allow such fishing to go on unhindered. Very briefly, I'm going to just close. In closing, we feel that a greater capacity building in seafood traceability is needed. And we see that through the initiatives of organizations like the MSC and others. And at least this will minimize the commingling of illegal harvested products with legally harvested seafood products. And to this, we want to congratulate the CRFM on its 20-year anniversary. And thank you again for allowing the CNFO to participate in this webinar.
First, I would like to thank you so much for inviting me, and also congratulations with the 20th anniversary of the CRFM. And I think that this is an anniversary which the whole region should be proud of. I've followed your organization for a few years, and I am absolutely impressed on how you were able to pull so many countries together in the same direction. So congratulations, and thank you so much for inviting me. So I wanted to address some questions of more general nature, but on a practical level, and also what we are currently working on in the Caribbean. So and also Ian Ralby, which has had a very good presentation. He had a definition of fisheries crime and IUU fishing. The definition that we use on fisheries crime is basically the definition in the so-called Copenhagen Declaration, which basically is crimes committed through the whole fishery supply and value chain. And that also includes illegal fishing, not only other types of crimes. So I'm as a lawyer, it's very tempting to go into a sort of legal discussion about the content of terms, but in general, and very the way that I look at the distinguishing between IUU fishing and fisheries crime can be described quite in my view, quite easily, which is basically that IUU fishing is the lack of flag states to uphold the fisheries management obligations according to international law. So the IUU instruments are primarily instruments to ensure that flag states uphold their international obligations of public international law. Fisheries crime, on the other hand, is basically about ensuring that our citizens uphold the national legislation. So, and that is the focus of the Blue Justice Initiative. Our focus is basically to assist law enforcement to be equipped and have a governance system to be able to successfully investigate, analyze, and hopefully also prosecute crimes through the whole fisheries supply and value chain, which also includes illegal fishing, which is criminalized in most jurisdictions all over the world, including in Norway, where I come from. Fisheries crime and illegal fishing is a crime according to national legislation and has been actually since the Viking times. So we have a very long tradition of this. So anyway, I would love to discuss that more, but I think since it was brought up, I wanted to make a comment to that. So this is a segment of the picture from the Blue Justice Conference that we had in Copenhagen in March this year. It was a great event. There was a very big participation from the Caribbean states, also including the CRFM was there. And there was also a lot of political engagement. We had about, I think it was about almost, I think it was nearly 40 ministers that participated either digitally or in present. I think it was about 27 that attended in person in Copenhagen. So the narrative basically and the Copenhagen Declaration, the understanding of what this problem is something that is growing and growing on a political level, which is very, very important. And why is this important? Well, this is, if you look at this slide, we have this box summary of 2 stages of action. And this is from a report, an excellent report that was published by the International Ocean Panel, which, by the way, the Jamaican Prime Minister is part of the high-level panel on ocean economy. So, and they commissioned a report, a so-called blue paper on organized crime in the fisheries sector. And they identified a 2-stage action to be able to focus and work against fisheries crime. The first stage is basically to agree on what we are dealing with, and that is on a political level, and that is basically what we call the political action. And that is all the politicians, all the ministers that was in Copenhagen, and also the signing of the Copenhagen Declaration, which is a minister declaration. It is extremely important that we agree on what the problem is. And the second stage after that is basically what we call practical tools. It's to move from political action to practical action. And that, of course, is a challenge, but that is, in my view, where we are now in the Caribbean. This is basically what we call the Blue Justice community. I've added colors to all the jurisdictions, including their EEZs, which currently has given support to the Copenhagen Declaration, the International Declaration against Transnational Organized Crime in the global fishing industry. This declaration is the only global declaration against organized crime in fisheries. There doesn't exist any other. There is none on UN level, but there is this international declaration. But there is 2 regional declarations. Now, one we have in the Nordic, which was actually adopted before the international, which is the Nordic Minister Statement on Transnational Organized Fisheries Crime. But then we also have, in 2021, the Caribbean Minister Resolution on the Copenhagen Declaration and Blue Justice. I think that that is something that the CRFM and the Caribbean region should be really, really proud of. I think it's groundbreaking. In addition to showing the political support, it also has a roadmap towards implementation of the declaration in the region. And that is basically where we are now, and trying to fulfill the political wishes of your region and to build that capacity which is needed to solve this problem. So I think that is something that you should be really proud of, and which I was very happy when it happened, and also something that I always talk about when I talk in other regions or with other countries, or even have presentation internally in the ministries in Norway. By the way, I would like to say that currently there is 61 countries now which support the declaration, and that is 37% of all coastal states of the world. So this is growing. The declaration is growing into a truly global instrument, and that is important to keep in mind, and the Caribbean is a major part of this. So, and then we have, what about the implementation status of the declaration? Well, what we currently see is 22 countries of the 51 actually are in the process on moving from political action to also implementing what we call practical tools. And one of the practical tools that we have developed through the Blue Justice Initiative. Now, the relationship between the Blue Justice Initiative and the declaration is that the initiative is to support countries to implement the declaration. So, and our main partner of this of the initiative is UNDP, United Nations Development Program, which has presence in a number of countries. They have a regional office in Panama. They have a country office in Jamaica, I believe, also in Barbados, and several countries in the region. And are currently working closely with several governments in the region to follow up these issues. The most practical tool that we have developed through the Blue Justice Initiative is a digital platform, a secure digital platform for government-to-government cooperation. The focus on the initiative is to build trust, to build network between governments, to be able to solve these issues. The platform is developed by the Norwegian Coastal Administration and is administered by UNDP. And a growing number of countries in the Caribbean is on that platform and are taking advantage of the services that are offered. Now, one of the services that is offered is that we have established a Blue Justice Tracking Center up in the north of Norway. That center is staffed by experts from the Norwegian Fisheries Directorate and also the Coastal Administration that assist countries in analyzing vessel movements that can be used in law enforcement. All of this is being done and shared through this secure environment on the digital platform that I talked about. I believe that the Caribbean is a success story, and of course we also hope and want to contribute to make it an even bigger success than it already is. So why is it a success? Well, first of all, you have a strong political engagement in this. Most of the CRFM member states are now supporting the Copenhagen Declaration, which means that you have an agreed on what the problem is. And that is extremely important when you are building structures to be able to solve the problem. First, you have to agree on the problem to be able to solve the problem. And that is why I think that this is a region which many regions should look at in that respect. The other thing is that you're in the process of creating structures, governance structures, that are able to respond to these problems. And the structure that is under development is a regional Blue Justice Caribbean hub. That is hosted by Jamaica, but is going to be a regional hub to work on against fisheries crime and to work on implementing the Copenhagen Declaration. That is, of course, something that we support together with UNDP. UNDP locally and also UNDP globally. And I believe that that is a very important part of the work that is going to be done in the Caribbean. We are flexible. We believe that what is important is that it's local solutions to the local problems that you have. It is important that we listen to the challenges that you have, and also to you on how to solve it. So that is basically our philosophy behind this. So that is a very important part of what is happening from the Blue Justice Initiative side in your region. The hub was launched in March during the Blue Justice conference in Copenhagen. And here you can see a familiar face by the microphone, but also several ministers and also the UNDP representative of the region, of the Caribbean region. So the leadership that the region is taking, not only in the region but also here globally on this global conference, is absolutely something that I would applaud, and thank you so much for that. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention on solutions is that Norway have for a long time been in process of preparing to share satellite data through the Blue Justice Initiative. And we are now so far in the preparations that we are that in the future there will be developed an ocean surveillance program under the Blue Justice Initiative. And this is, of course, something that the Caribbean will benefit from. A part of this program is also the elements which has already been established, such as the Blue Justice Tracking Center in Norway, which also are also doing training of analysts from member states of the initiative. And we will have the 4 first trainees to go up to the north of Norway now in a few weeks' time, actually, which two of them is actually from the Caribbean region. So that is a part of it, and of course also satellite technology and the Norwegian so-called microsatellites, which we have to collect the AIS signals, is also part of this work. So this is an area which we want to explore more, and we want to explore it in close cooperation with the states and governments that are part of the initiative.
Good day, everyone. My name is Virun Lutchman, Maritime Analyst at CARICOM Implementation Agency for Crime and Security, and I'm presenting today on regional efforts in support of CARICOM and CRFM member states addressing IUU fishing and fisheries crime from the regional crime and security point of view, but focusing very specifically on the use of maritime domain awareness systems. The presentation will begin with a quick brief on IUU fishing and transnational organized crime as a regional security issue, then a short introduction to CARICOM IMPACS, followed by a section on maritime domain awareness support to member states, and then closed off with a look at the over-the-horizon threat mitigation that IMPACS has provided to member states regarding IUU fishing and fisheries crime issues. Note that I will not be naming any member states or other non-CARICOM states during this presentation. IUU fishing impacts the sustainability of aquatic resources, threatens vulnerable ecosystems, and is known to damage the communities that rely on fisheries for their livelihoods and food security. Coast dwellers and island communities like CARICOM and CRFM member states depend on the ocean for their food and survival. Small-scale fishers that follow rules and regulations are particularly vulnerable. Depleting fish stocks caused by IUU fishing drives a surge in fisheries-related crime, and fisher folk turn to illegal activities to support their families. They make use of their knowledge and expertise in the maritime environment to smuggle contraband, including drugs, guns, and people. The close maritime borders of CARICOM member states mean criminals can quickly move from jurisdiction to jurisdiction via cheap, unregistered, or poorly recorded fishing vessels. Criminals take advantage of a lack of coordination in regional crime-fighting efforts among member states to perpetrate their crimes across borders and on the high seas. Cross-border communication is required to effectively address the combined threat of IUU fishing and fisheries crime. I have a brief introduction to CARICOM IMPACS here. The Caribbean Community Implementation Agency for Crime and Security, IMPACS, was established as the implementation arm of the regional architecture to manage CARICOM's action agenda on crime and security. Security is one of the 4 pillars that underpin the stated objectives of CARICOM. The other pillars are economic integration, foreign policy coordination, and human and social development. CARICOM IMPACS has 2 sub-agencies: the Joint Regional Communications Center, JRCC, located in Barbados, and the Regional Intelligence Fusion Center, RIFC, located in Trinidad and Tobago. Both centers are staffed by detachments from CARICOM member states, and they bring together the very best personnel that CARICOM has to offer from a variety of disciplines, with varied skill sets that complement each other. The Maritime Targeting Unit operates as one unit located in both centers and provides actionable maritime intelligence and analysis that enables member states to engage in intelligence-driven operations. And we do this through the use of our maritime domain awareness systems. Maritime domain awareness is the effective understanding of anything associated with the maritime domain that could impact security, safety, the economy, or the marine environment. Maritime domain awareness, or MDA, is much more than simply knowing vessel locations. It entails understanding vessel behavior patterns, fleet ownership, structures, cargo and passenger profiling, and everything and anything related to the operations of vessels that can be used to understand their possible derogatory effects on security, safety, the economy, or the marine environment. CARICOM IMPACS provides member states with maritime domain awareness support through the sharing of fishing vessel intelligence reports, which we share with member state national points of contact that highlight relevant fishing vessel trends in the region. These reports include suspicious activity observed and feature analysis for specific member states, areas, and observed trends as required. We also track specific high-risk fishing vessels as required. IMPACS identifies and tracks vessels of interest, including extra-regional vessels of interest. IMPACS maritime domain awareness is not limited to the EEZs of member states and is capable of tracking vessels anywhere in the world. IMPACS provides real-time tracking, analysis, and predictions of possible activity in the region. And IMPACS ensures that intelligence reaches key enablers in time to interdict and/or inspect as necessary. And here I'm going to speak about some of the over-the-horizon threat mitigation. Dr. Ralby started on this a bit, speaking of the vessels that aided and abetted IUU fishing. So I'm just going to touch on the Port State Measures Agreement. The agreement on port state measures to prevent, deter, and eliminate illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, also known as the PSMA, seeks to prevent, deter, and eliminate IUU fishing through the adoption and implementation of effective port state measures as a means of ensuring the long-term conservation and sustainable use of living marine resources. And several CARICOM member states are parties to this agreement, and several non-party member states have conducted capacity building training exercises in preparation to become a party to the PSMA. And I bring this up because the PSMA refers to fishing-related activities in support of fishing, and then goes on to define those activities to include the provisioning of personnel, fuel, gear, and other supplies at sea. What this means is fisheries authorities must now examine the activities of vessels not traditionally associated with the fishing industry in order to determine the legal status of fisheries product that passes through their ports. These vessels often operate far from CARICOM member states, and their activities may be difficult for fisheries authorities to detect and investigate without assistance. And here I have an example of one of these non-traditional threats that fisheries authorities may not be familiar with. This particular vessel of interest shown here is a 100-meter-long oil products tanker built in 2008 that changed its identity 4 times in the past 5 years. The vessel was on a course that was suspiciously different from its normal sailing pattern, and it was actually on a course to the Caribbean region after meeting with hundreds of fishing vessels on the high seas. An investigation was conducted by IMPACS, and it was determined that the vessel met with 74 distant water fishing vessels from 11 countries in the past year, including some considered illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing risks. Further investigations on these fishing vessels revealed that 2 of these vessels were fishing in the ICAT convention area without authorizations. CRFM and member state national points of contact were provided with intelligence on the activity of this vessel before it entered the region, so that they would be able to take the necessary action. Maritime domain awareness ensures transparency and traceability and allows a relationship between various types of vessels, port facilities, and even companies and individuals to be understood. These relationships are often quite complicated and difficult to understand from a single perspective, but IMPACS is able to bring a big picture threat analysis approach to the problems of IUU fishing and fisheries crime. In closing, maritime domain awareness allows CARICOM member states to disrupt and dismantle fisheries crime and IUU fishing by providing actionable intelligence and early warning on vessels of interest and high-risk vessels which may be involved in IUU fishing. This intelligence allows member states to take action against bad actors without compromising the ability of legitimate fishers to access the resources of the sea. Thank you very much, and happy anniversary to the CRFM.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Rolerick, the Regional Maritime Officer at the Regional Security System Headquarters here in Barbados. And it is indeed a pleasure for us, Peter, thank you for the invitation, for us to be here to share with the wider audience some of the work we've been doing here in the RSS sub-region with CRFM and our other partners. The presentation today basically is going to cover an overview of maritime security in the RSS sub-region. We're going to look at our area of operation, We can look at capacity building for addressing IUU fishing and other fisheries crimes. And I've just got four small areas under those. One is the RSS CRFM partnership, training and law enforcement, any gaps and deficiencies, areas to improve, and speak a little bit about our collaboration with our partners. The RSS was created out of a need for a collective response to security threats that were impacting the stability of the region in the late 1970s and early 80s. And by 1985, we started with 5 persons in 5 member states in 82, and by 1985, 86, we had 7, and Guyana joined last year, 2022, to bring the total number to 8. So these 8 members, they also form part of a series of regional networks and organizations within our area, namely the OECS, CARICOM, OECS, and ACS. And given some of the challenges and constraints of the maritime security forces in the RSS area, effective responses, policing, and enforcement of the maritime laws, they continue to challenge these units within their respective areas, their respective maritime jurisdictions, of maintaining and sustaining a strong security posture and having a comprehensive maritime domain awareness picture. Cooperation then remains one of our greatest assets, which the security cluster of the RSS has to leverage any advantage it may have against the perpetrators of maritime crimes. Within the RSS sub-region, it is part of the Western Hemispheric Bloc and is integrally affected by the security arrangements and the geopolitical realities of the world's influential and powerful states. But within our own Caribbean area, CARICOM area, we know that CARICOM Crime and Security Strategy of 2013, as well as the review report of 2019, lists several strategic goals. And I'll just touch on 6 of them. Strategic goal number 4, to increase transborder intelligence and information sharing. Strategic goal number 5, to enhance law enforcement and security capabilities and strengthen regional security systems. Strategic goal number 6, to enhance maritime and airspace awareness and to strengthen CARICOM borders, including contiguous land borders. Strategic goal number 9, to pursue cooperative security engagements to tackle and manage shared risk and threats. Security goal number 12, to strengthen mechanisms against human trafficking. Security goal number 13, to improve resilience to natural and man-made disasters. And all of these, you would appreciate, are of concern to us here in the region. Now, despite the fact that the RSS member states are at varying levels of development, socio-economic development has been one of the key pillars on which these small island states are building their societies, while at the same time enhancing their status quo. And in this regard, then, 2 of the more important features identified by the member states in the pursuit of economic development are: 1, to improve and sustain the well-being of the member state. And under that, they do that by the maintenance of sovereignty, the protection of economic interests and its citizens, also to protect and monitor maritime space and the resource within their maritime jurisdictions, to strengthen regional maritime security cooperation and tackling serious organized crime that transcend their borders. And the second one is to advance the development and economic prosperity of these small island states through the exploration and exploitation of their respective blue economies. Now, Article 4.1 of the RSS Treaty lists a number of areas ranging from the interdiction of the trafficking of illegal narcotic drugs to immigration control, fisheries protection, pollution, maritime policing duties, all a number of which actually occur in our maritime space. And of these several points, and I want to make it clear, there are 3 that are deeply aligned with Article 4. And one is the protection of economic interests, and this includes the safeguarding of maritime energy resources, the sustainable exploitation of the natural and marine resources in the territorial waters and exclusive economic zones of member states, and the control of IUU fishing, also the security of member states and their fishing fleets, and the delimitation of their boundaries. The second one is the promotion and development of common and validated situational awareness. And the third one, the effective management of external borders to prevent counter illegal cross-border activities. Now, against this backdrop, the member states of the regional security system continue to work towards building the capacity for combating fisheries crimes in general and IUU fishing in particular, which occur in the territorial waters and the exclusive economic zones of the member states. Now, what you can't see and what would have been up at this point is a map showing you the area of operation from Guyana in the south to St. Kitts, Nevis, and Antigua in the north. And note that we are along that Eastern Caribbean island chain. We are interspersed with the French territories of Martinique and Guadeloupe, as well as the British overseas territories of Montserrat. And then we have the Dutch states further at the north end, going north of St. Kitts Nevis. And this makes for a very interesting picture, because this small Eastern Caribbean section is just part of this vast entire Western Hemispheric block. Our total maritime space is over 769,000 square kilometers. And of course, that is several times larger than the land space. That maritime space, if you wanted to get a relative comparison, is about 1.8 times the size of Texas. Whilst the land space is just over 218,000 square kilometers, almost or close to the size of the UK. And this represents a very vast area of responsibility for these small islands with regards to sovereignty and also to protect their own interests from the illicit trafficking activities, exploitation, pollution, and other threats that may arise from time to time in our domain. As far as capacity building is concerned, back in 2017, well, prior to 2017, when I first met Peter, sometime back in 1993, we were working on fisheries law enforcement within the OECS areas. But since 2017, the CRFM and the RSS, they partnered in laying on some training in fisheries prosecution and interdiction. And we've been running that course every year since then to present. We've trained over 60 officers to date, and in 2022 we introduced another phase to it, which would have been an online phase, which would allow for more persons for 1 week to come and join the program, and this is followed by the 3-week residential phase. Now, what we've seen since 27, what we've been tracking a little bit more is the activity as reported by member states, and we've been seeing more reports on interceptions of and legal action being taken against violators of fisheries laws in some of our jurisdictions. And this, of course, is within the territorial limits. We are yet to be able to extend those reaches outside of the 12 nautical mile jurisdiction, because we have some gaps in our system. And when we talk about gaps and deficiencies, yes, we do have some limitations as far as distant water maritime assets are concerned, where we do not have the reach in all of the member states to get out into the vast exclusive economic zones of member states. Also, we are limited in terms of monitoring and tracking, because very few of the member states have that capacity of coastal radars to assist with MCS activities. And of course, while we do get some information from our sister agency in terms of the reports that they generate, again, the feedback coming from some of the member states is not as consistent as we would like in terms of how they're applying and using this information to enhance their maritime domain awareness. Of course, there are other platforms and programs out there, satellite-based technology systems, that we continue to try to get member states to use to allow them to have a better picture of what is happening within their own areas of operation. Where can we find improvements to help to continue to help build capacity? We need a more cohesive vessel monitoring program for the region. I know that one or two member states have been looking at and identifying ways in which they can get this done, but on a wider scale, we need to do it more as a region. We need to have greater information sharing taking place between the fisheries departments and the law enforcement agencies. And we need to extend that also by moving towards a regional register of fishing vessels, which would then give us law enforcement agencies a bit more to work with. In terms of increasing our MCS and MDA programs, of course, we need to make the public, we need to take our program now to the wider public and make them more aware of what is happening, not only at the national level, but within the region of itself. And of course, there are a number of pieces of legislation which each member state has on its own books, but also there are the national plans of actions, other policies, regulations, administrative policies that will provide for more effective and efficient management of the living marine resources. And within each member state, they need to be working a lot closer with the law enforcement or the Coast Guard unit or police marine unit in that regard, and making those members a bit more aware and understanding some of the other challenges of managing the resources within their particular jurisdictions. The RSS of itself, we are signatory to a number of memorandum of understanding with not only regional agencies, but also with other international organizations and agencies. And of course, because we cover the 8 member states, there are some instances where some of those agreements can extend. So it gives an arm, particularly when we're doing coordinated patrols or when we're doing joint operations with some of our partners like the US, the UK, the French, the Dutch, and so on. Each of our member states at this point in time currently have a national maritime security strategy, which also takes into consideration fisheries matters. And there's an overarching regional security strategy which looks at the entire region now as a whole, and the challenges that we face and how we work towards countering or providing countermeasures to combat some of the illicit activity occurring within our member states. In terms of our collaboration, we continue to engage our partners, UNODC, through their Global Maritime Crime Program and their Caribbean Forum on Maritime Crime, both those programs. We've been consistently attending meetings, sharing information, and of course, looking at ways in which we can make our member states a bit more involved. Recently, we've had some training done with the Skylight platform, and this is one of the tools that we're encouraging our member states, law enforcement agencies to use to assist them in better not only understanding what is going on, but to help them strategically plan their operations. We continue to work with CARICOM IMPACS, GRCC, our sister agency here in the region. And of course, they continue to do good work in producing some of the reports that are very helpful, again, to the law enforcement units. And we continue to be observers at WCAFC meetings, of course, RSS, and they do have a silent seat on the regional working group for IUU fishing and other related matters. And we look to continue and strengthen the partnerships that we have and the work that we have been doing. In this short time, Peter, I know we have a little bit of a start, so I'm going to stop here. And of course, I'm free to take any questions that the members might want to pose in terms of what else and how we can enhance what we're doing. You can visit our website, www.rss.org.bb, or you can email me at rolerick.sobers@rss.org.bb. And with that having been said, again, I wish to thank you, CRFM and Peter, for the invitation here to share with you. And of course, we at the RSS extend warm congratulations to the CRFM on their 20th anniversary celebrations. Thank you very much.
It's wonderful to be on, and I would start by congratulating the CRFM on its 20th anniversary. And then continue to say that this is a continued transformation, building on our best practices for the efforts that have moved us to where we are now, started all the way back in the 1980s as a project, and then has moved to now the well-known international agency, the CRFM. But this has also been done through partnerships. And what has come out of the conversation is strength through unity. That's actually the motto of the regional security system. And what we have been working on also with partnership to seek to define matters which are integrated, which are holistic, which are visionary, and which are indigenous in nature, taking into consideration the peculiarities of our member states who are in sub-regions. There is something which has also provoked my mind, and this is on the experience of Norway. The mention that the law which is now dealing with blue justice has been there from even in the times of the Vikings. Now, the question that really provoked me on this is very simply, how could it be? And I'm our presenter on this matter. How could it be that we could have had this sort of law already there for all the way back into what, the 10th century maybe? And then it has taken so long to transition, not for you now, Ian, it has taken so long to transition to this. What has been so responsible for this very slow movement globally? And very succinctly, why and what should be prioritized?
I agree with Ian that IUU fishing is about sustainability of basically fisheries management sustainability. When you look at the difference between IUU fishing and fisheries crime, basically from a legal perspective, it's IUU fishing is basically activities which are unwanted, which is damaging the sustainability of fishing, and is the responsibility of the flag states. That is the big difference, because fisheries crime is the responsibility of me and you. IUU fishing is the responsibility of flag states. So it basically, the term IUU fishing is on the level in the legal system of international law, which is the law that is regulating countries' behavior, while fisheries crime refers to the breach of national legislation. So what makes it a bit confusing is that the word illegal fishing appears in both terms, basically. So, but it's not the same. So in the Copenhagen Declaration, when we write illegal fishing, it is not a synonym of IUU fishing. So so IUU fishing is basically a problem which flag states has to solve. A good example is maybe a flag state which do not have the capacity or the will to respond when vessels under the flag is, for example, fishing unregulated in international waters. So when we blacklist those vessels in regional fisheries management organizations, it's a blacklisting of a flag state's vessel. And a very good example of that is from our region, which where you have the Northeast Atlantic Fisheries Commission, NIAFC. And that was one of the first RFMOs that started to blacklist, to have an IUU list. And I remember very well because I was at that time I was part of the committee that was deciding which vessels were going to be IUU listed. And there was this vessel from an African flag state which was blacklisted, and the owners of the vessel was absolutely desperate because they were unable to get any answer from the flag state administration. And the flag state administration did not answer any emails, nothing from the Secretariat of NIAF. So the question was it possible for the owner of the vessel, which physically on a practical level had done this, was it possible for him to bring the case forward by himself to the Commission? And the answer was no, because this is a matter of the flag state. So it is a matter of international law. It is not a matter of national legislation. So the way that flag states can become non-IUU flag states is basically to have good legislation and good systems in their own countries, which minimize the risk of their fleet of fishing vessels going to other countries with, in some cases, weak governance systems, and then fishing illegally in those waters. So that is IUU fishing from based on my analysis, and this is, it's not only an academic thing, because it's actually extremely important for governments, actually, for fisheries administrations to have a clear understanding, or even make a decision by yourself. What is IUU fishing? What is illegal fishing?
Thank you, Gunnar. I want to recognize the raised hands and then come back to a question in the chat. So in order of the raised hands, Gregory Kong.
Good night, good morning, good evening to you all. The truth is I have comments and questions on all the presentation, but I will just touch on some in the hope that other participants will raise some of the issues that I have concern with. If they don't, Chair, I hope that I get the chance to address some of these issues. I have some comments.
From the hip, keep it short and pointed.
I will try my best, Chair, but you know me. Anyway, I'll try my best. First of all, very quickly, I'm not surprised to hear praise being showered on CRFM. The recognition of CRFM's excellent work is widespread and well recognized. Again, colleagues from the region, we are not as bad as we think. Anyway, enough said. The issue of this IUU thing, I'm not a lawyer, but please remember that some jurisdictions have enshrined the terminology IUU fishing in their legislation. IUU fishing is not just a regional and international phenomenon. It is a national phenomenon. So I think we need to perhaps take a look at this, at these nuances. I'm attracted by the notion that we must separate the UU. I think it is rather unfortunate that we're trying to bring attention to two things and we have muddied the water. Illegal fishing is illegal fishing. In many jurisdictions in Caribbean country, unreported fishing is not illegal. And the issue of unregulated fishing does not exist in many instances. So we must be very careful. That is why I'm glad that we are talking about separating those issues. One more point I want to quickly raise is that in most international and regional instruments, I see focus on the EEZ. We are forgetting that there are maritime zones under the jurisdiction of coastal states. There's internal waters, there's territorial waters, there are archipelagic waters. So there again, I am not a lawyer and I don't want to get into any discussion, but I just want to raise that we need to start talking about all the maritime space under the jurisdiction of states. Let me go into some of the questions. I'm surprised that I haven't heard anything about ITLAS, the 2015 advisory, which I think is important. My interpretation is that their flag states are liable and they can be sued. Now, I would like to have some comments from the panel on that. Now, where are we with this? I have not seen anything at all to advance this framework. Has this ever been tested? But this falls into my understanding of UNCLOS, and they have elaborated it. and this falls into the flag state responsibilities that they have. But it also falls into this whole issue of what I've been hearing about, this blue justice thing with regards to cooperation among states. And what I would like to understand, first of all, has this opinion of ITLAS been tested? Is there any legal framework for something like this to occur? What needs to be considered? And then the next thing is that this falls straight into the issue of bilateral and multilateral cooperation among states with regards to the flag state having an obligation when they get information from the coastal states that is being subjected to IUU fishing. Do they have this obligation? Is there a mechanism and a framework for these flag states to do the necessary investigations, to take actions, to provide information to the coastal states? And dare I say, set up a mechanism that will share a proportion or all of, well, a proportion of the sanctions, the monetary sanctions that is fined on the IUU fishers if they are found guilty with the coastal states that was wrong. I have more. I hope I get a chance to ask more. But let me stay with that first. Thank you, moderator.
I thank you very much for raising that, pointing to, and I'll name it, 9 maritime zones. The question which I raised before was intended to point on, we have had, or we have within the maritime zones, even the, what we now look at, the seabed and the subsoil beyond national jurisdiction, but that is regulated. Essentially, I have heard it described that we are still having the issue of almost piracy in the surface area because we had not started with that whole issue of regulations there. And that was the point I was signaling towards. If we had it from the 10th century, why has it been so slow in actually coming into reality and implementation? So that is really the question we have in the chat.
Yeah, Mr. Moderator, forgive me, just one last thing. I want to recommend consideration of the terminology fisheries-related crime. I think the term fisheries crime is unclear, it muddies the issue, it causes problems. And we must not forget also that one last thing, Chair, fishing, capture fisheries occur not only in the marine environment. You have many countries in the Caribbean, including Jamaica, Guyana, that has inland fisheries. And there's also capture fishery-based aquaculture and mariculture. So we need to find a way to incorporate all of these things. I think we're running a risk when we are compartmentalizing everything and not taking into consideration these potential activities. Sorry about that, moderator. Thank you.
You are very welcome, because you have touched on the other point where I mentioned when I congratulated CRFM that what we are looking at is holistic, it's visionary, and it has to be integrated and tailored essentially for us. So you have touched on that point, and that's why for me as the moderator and understanding our needs which are specific to our region, where we are among the smallest of the SIDS globally, these matters have to be specific to the region. Before I move to the question, I've seen the hand, Ian, but I'm going to wait a moment. In the chat, there is a question. If a fishing boat brings its catch straight from the fishing ground to a country different from where it is registered, is that considered an import or landing? Now, this question I am going to invite our head of CRFM, or Milton, to take this and as well to expand, please, with whatever he's going to treat, given the time frame, making the point of how many members are actually participating. And just in a smidgen, give how we started as the project in the 1980s with the support of Canada, and then how we have transitioned to where we are, because it is a process of building. And so as we move forward, here is what we need to see and to have, that we continue to build on good and solid foundations and transform as needs be concerning these. Milton, over to you. So you have the one in the chat, you have what you intended to speak about, and you need to touch on our history, because we need to make sure that this is handled. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Okay, I provided some feedback already to the question about the harvesting and landing of harvesting fish in one location and landing it in another, and I assume that is done without the proper authorization. If you fish without proper authorization in another country's jurisdiction, that is illegal. And that's a criminal activity in our countries, all the CARICOM countries. So for our purposes, any fishing vessel that crosses the borders and operate illegally without permission, that is in the waters of another country, neighboring country, that is illegal. And the country whose waters are violated, they have the responsibility to protect their waters and their fish stocks, and they can take enforcement action against that vessel that's fishing illegally in their waters. Now, if the vessel catches a fish and then gets away and go and land it in another country, if it is their flag state, so if it's country X, so the vessel left country X, went to country B, caught the fish in country B and took it back to country X and landed there. If country B has the information and can pass that on to the authorities in country X, then country X would have an obligation to investigate and to take appropriate action, because it's not, it's illegal fishing. So that's a very clear-cut case. And I know these terminologies can give rise to uncertainty as to what is going on. And this is the part, I think, of our responsibility to ensure that countries and enforcement authorities have clarity regarding the international rules and when they apply, and the national rules and when they apply. So I just want it to be very clear. Anybody who come into your water and fish, whether it's your own nationals, depending on your rules, or foreigners who have no authorization, no permits, and they come and fish in your water, it's illegal and that's criminal in our jurisdiction. I know in some countries, illegal fishing may not be a criminal activity, but in the CARICOM countries, it is always criminal. Now, one thing that I find very useful, and Andre in his intervention mentioned it, the outcome of case 21 dealing with IUU fishing. That was a case brought by the Sub-Regional Fisheries Commission in West Africa, and the judges provided very, very clear opinion explaining the legal rules and when responsibility arises and liability arises and the due diligence. So we can provide and share that information, because the CRFM, we participated in that case, and the judges were very impressed with our involvement and our submission. And I met one of the judges at a meeting in Senegal a few years later, and he told me they were most impressed. They were blown away by our involvement and the arguments that we presented, and they relied a lot on the arguments that our counsel presented to them at that meeting in arriving at their final decision. But that decision, it's extremely useful. We should all be aware of it and understand the implication if indeed we are seriously concerned about IUU fishing and understanding our legal rights and obligations and the responsibility of the flag states over their vessels, and the fact that a state can also be held liable in addition to the vessels, because very often you cannot apprehend the vessels, and the vessels can get away. But if you have enough information and you can provide that to the state, you can take action against a state that is not managing its fishing vessels, that are operating and they're not controlling their vessels, and those vessels are allowed to engage in IUU fishing. If you're harmed, if your country, your fishers are harmed by the activity of those vessels, you can take action against the state itself, and the state can be held liable for damages for the losses that you suffer. So this is very important indeed. So listening to the discussion, I think we need to be careful that we do not create uncertainties and doubts. The fact of the matter is, for us as small island developing states, we have significant maritime space. We have limited capacity to monitor and take action against infringement and violation of our waters. Any violation of our waters, anybody who comes and fish illegally, we can take action against them. And for us, that's a crime, and that's illegal, and they're subject to legal sanction. The problem, in my opinion, is that our capacity is limited, and the sanctions that we impose very often are not adequate to really deter the action, the illegal action, and to really punish them. But the concept of fisheries crime, in my opinion, is very useful, because illegal fishing is just one. To really hit these violators hard, you need to address the myriad of crime that they are committing: illegal fishing, fraud, document fraud, tax fraud, whatever it is, human trafficking, everything. If you can, and that will help you to recognize the seriousness of what they're doing. And it's not just so it's not just the sustainability issue, it's all the economic issues, the human rights issues, and so on, that are often tied up together with this, that makes it so serious. And we need to begin to see these things from that bigger perspective, larger perspective, and take action appropriately. And most of our countries, if not all of our countries, have significant laws that we can bring to bear on the problem and address it in a more comprehensive manner, rather than just focusing on the sustainability aspect of the fisheries and the marine environment. Okay, I leave it there for now. Thank you
very much, Milton. I'm going to go in order: Ian, and then Gunnar, and then Gavin. I'm giving you 1 minute each, because I have a question specifically for Rolerick. They're following. Ian.
Thanks very much. I think it's really important to remember that the right to regulate fishing is a coastal state right. That the problem is that coastal states have sovereign rights over the living and non-living marine resources in their maritime zones out to the 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone. And so it is primarily a coastal state right. The discussion of flag state responsibility for IUU fishing is secondary to the coastal state responsibility. And I think that is a blurry line that's starting to get confusing here. The it-loss decision that we've been talking about builds on the one that I actually indirectly referenced on from the Virginia G case, which says that any kind of regulation of activity, including bunkering in the exclusive economic zone, has to be tied to IUU fishing. It is essentially that opinion says that it is the coastal state responsibility, and secondary to that, flag states have responsibility. And I think Milton Haughton has done such a great job of explaining it. I can say nothing further, but that coastal state responsibility is the thing I want to emphasize. And so I want to thank Greg Kong for those excellent comments and that excellent question. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Gunnar, over to you.
Thank you very much. No, I just want to say, you know, Milton's explanation, I think is absolutely great, and I think it's if we try to put this on a practical level, we in my country, we had a lot of IUU fishing in the Barents Sea when I started in the Coast Guard, and that was basically long distance fishing fleets under all kind of flags from all over the world, doing both illegal fishing and unregulated fishing in the Barents Sea. Almost resulted in a collapse of the cod fisheries there. We managed to basically eradicate IUU in the Barents Sea, but we still have fisheries crime in Norway, and that is the illegal fishing under flag states that are responsible and that it is possible to cooperate with. So, and I think that is basically what we're trying to do. And coming back to David's question to me, why haven't this been done before? Since, you know, even in the Viking times, we were talking about illegal fishing as a crime in Norway. We have always done it like this. We have always had the prosecutor, the police, Coast Guard involved in investigations and prosecutions. Some Norwegians have gone to prison for fisheries crime. For foreigners that are doing illegal fishing, we're not allowed to do that, but they get very heavy fines, which is also a criminal sanctions. So that is what is new was basically when we experienced so much long distance IUU fishing activities in the Barents Sea. We also saw that this was a very transnational activity. And even if we were driving out the IUU fleet, we saw that a lot of the crime in the fishing industry in our region that is still there is of a transnational nature. And that is the reason why we started to look out of the country, because basically because this criminal activity, you have to deal with it as crime, as any other type of crime. So there's no difference from a legal perspective. It is a criminalized activity, and we have to deal with it. But it's just that police, prosecutors, the general public very often don't look at this as proper crime because it's happening at sea. And that is what is called sea blindness. And that is one of the big challenges that I have had in my country to sort of convince the political leadership, ministries, agencies, and so on to work together and to look at this as a sort of proper crime, for it to be prioritized. So you actually have the resource to start working seriously with this, and not only catching the illegal fishing itself, but actually have the resources to go to the roots of the problem, which is, as Milton said in his first presentation, it is economic crime, basically. And then you have to investigate it as economic crime. So I think I'll leave it with that. Thank you.
Robin, over to you. Thank you for your presentations, for highlighting all of the coordination at the regional level and the implications. You've raised your hand. Over to you.
Thank you very much. But Gunnar kind of touched on some of the points I wanted to make, because you asked a question earlier, why it took so long. My limited analysis from coming into this sector a few years ago is that the response has always been, as Gunnar just said, out at sea and a silo response. But when you look on it as organized crime and you have a multi-agency response to it, then you will be able to have a greater impact. That's also why we're looking on the regional hub through the Blue Justice mechanism, because one Caribbean island, one small island developing state cannot really fight against this scourge. It's not only the fisheries crime, but the other crimes that affect the trading, guns, drugs, everything that was mentioned previously by the other presenters. So that is why we have found it here in Jamaica very beneficial to do the multi-agency approach and the regional approach, where we share. The Blue Justice community offers a secure platform to exchange information, both locally, regionally, and internationally. So if we use this and communicate with each other, work together, then we'll be able to address all of these problems. And that is why, as you asked, why from the days of the Vikings we knew this, but weren't doing it. We're just too selective, too out at sea, not working together to have a holistic response to this problem. Thank you.
I'm going to say that the coastal state rights absolutely supported. In fact, even from the coastal states, there is the IMO mandatory audits, which also deals with those aspects of states. I do have a challenge concerning a lot of the blacklisting, and I'm speaking from my personal experience of head of Coast Guard and dealing with this matter, from head of Maritime Administration, from dealing with this matter across the OECS, started life as Fisheries Surveillance Coordinator for all of the OECS member states, of having aviation and maritime security nationally, and still continuing with those regionally for CARICOM. Okay, so allow me to make some observation. Even a lot of the presentation on the matters of the delimitation of maritime boundaries, they need to have a notation to say on those they do not necessarily reflect the matters of member states. A point for noting before sharing. The Blue Justice mechanism, Gavin, you may recall we met at in Portugal. Okay, so on this matter of the Blue Justice, I commend that we need to go forward and have the center as we move forward. In terms of the matters of capacity, the reality of the states, and especially of the Eastern Caribbean, they started with the first set as model legislation, the first set of legislation that was given priority and which was cutting edge at its time, integrated, and the same across the member states were in the OECS. And so with that, Peter Murray, Milton Haughton, when we did all of this work, this had the political decision of the heads, and because this then cuts across to all the matters. If we look at our Nobel laureate from St. Lucia, when he expanded on what economic activities should be, it touched on ensuring that this embraced the human elements and their well-being. And so all of what we have been listed concerning this are then of tremendous importance. And the transnational aspect, certainly. While we have delimitation of maritime boundaries, the sea is fluid. So these are some of the realities. When Coast Guarding started in the Eastern Caribbean, the fastest vessels on water were the Coast Guard vessels. But again, the reality of SIDS, maintaining these platforms are challenging, and therefore it is necessary to do it together. Blacklisting. In my capacity as the Director for Maritime Administration, there was a vessel which was blacklisted. Interestingly, it was in a port state under because it had not done its compliance. It was able to leave the port state when, without the port state officers doing the requisite enforcement. And then we were asked that this vessel is now blacklisted when the flag state was cooperating. And then it wanted to be shifted to the flag state for the flag state to be penalized. The port state failed. And therefore, that is why it has to be an overall effort globally, because it cannot just be shifted from one to the other on the matters of blacklisting. This is why I am pressing the point that we have to do this together. Unity is strength.
I am the former director of fisheries. I'm retired. Okay, so I used to be up in Jamaica for a little bit. So I kind of have a little bit of experience with some of these things. So I'm not speaking on behalf of Jamaica. I'm speaking on, with regards to my experience with some of the issues. One of the things that I have noticed is that many governments are trying to facilitate business by speeding up and making easier the authorization of fishing and aquaculture licensing regime. Yet they need to understand the very complex nature of IUU fishing and fisheries crime, and then that the necessary due diligence that must be done in order to ensure that some of these activities are properly monitored. So I just want to make that comment. The other comment I want to make is one of the critical problems we have is repatriation with regards to dealing with IUU fishing by foreigners. In many instances in the Caribbean, some of the flag states that engage in IUU fishing, there are over 100 crew members. They have juveniles on board. It creates a lot of problems and a lot of cost. And in order to stay away from the cost, what governments do is to run the case as fast as possible, release the vessel so the vessel can take back the people. 100 people. That is something that we need to look at, the issue of repatriation. And when you talk about the juveniles, you can't treat them like you treat the adults. You have to house them in different areas, and there are many, many different things that come into being. Another critical issue is that when they release the boat, in order to save on money, the defense argument is their fishing, their main fishing equipment, which is the small canoe, is for safety. And so in most cases, they release the vessel, and then they sit and they keep their vessel. One last important thing, which is even more critical. What I had noticed, and I don't know if Gavin has changed this and found the legal regime for this, but I'm saying this for everybody to consider. What has become a normal defense of IUU fishing vessels, the owners of IUU fishing vessels. Now, this happened in a famous case when a vessel was forfeited, and the owner came and bled his heart out that he's the sufferer in the world, and he did his due diligence, and the captain went off on a frolic, so the man got back his vessel. So since that has happened, every single case, now this is my time, I'm not speaking for after I retired, but every single case that came to court, when the vessel was forfeited, the owner would come and the captain will plead guilty and say, I went off on a frolic on my own, I did this, and the owner did not know anything at all about this. So the owner comes now and say, you can't penalize me for this. I did everything in my power to stop this man from doing it. He's at fault. He's the one that did this. I had nothing to do with this. Do not penalize me, and they get back the vessel. No, I don't know if anybody have any comments on that, but I think that's
I have a comment. There's a thing in law known as vicarious responsibility.
Very carefully.
There you go. I've answered your point. there's a situation in law known as vicarious responsibility. The law should apply to the captain and to the owner, both. Thank you.
That has not worked in our
well, it needs to work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is clear from the discussion, presentation and discussion, that this is a very hot topic, and we need to, in my opinion, do this again and continue the dialogue, because there are a lot of issues here, and understandably, this is a very complex issue, and it's a very, very important issue, and I think there's a lot more general awareness, public awareness and understanding that we need to facilitate, so that, you know, the public can better understand. I mean, even among the fisheries people, many of them are on the conference. You know, we see the challenges. But let me just say a quick point about the Jamaica legislation, because I experienced that when I was in Jamaica before Andre Kong joined the Fisheries Department. 5 US boats were arrested and they were charged, and they eventually appealed, and the court found in their favor. They got back their vessels, and it is because of the weakness in Jamaica's fisheries laws. And that weakness needs to be addressed. If it hasn't been addressed yet, I don't think it has been. So it remains a loophole. And very often our laws have these loopholes which you have to address. So Jamaica needs to address that. So I want to use this opportunity to just say thank you for this vibrant discussion that has been going on, and I know we could continue. So thanks to the panelists, thanks to the participants who have taken the time. We still have 75 people on the call. I know we have lost maybe about 40 or so, or 50. But for those who have remained, you know, with us and contributed, you know, this has been an exciting time. So enjoy the rest of your day, your night, your morning, whatever it is. And thanks to the panelists again, and to you, Chairman and Mr. Moderator. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.